Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and today me and James will be continuing our Miami Heat San Antonio Spurs finals recap, and we are moving on to our fourth topic on did Kawhi Leonard deserve to win finals MVP? So as the biggest Spurs fan in the world, James, did Kawhi Leonard deserve to be finals MVP, and why did he? Why did he not deserve to be finals MVP?
If you look at it, I would like to first talk about the other candidates for the MVP. You've got Tony Parker, you've got Tim Duncan, because I know Ginobili and Mills played well, but they didn't deserve MVP as much as those three in particular. I mean, Tim Duncan played a great series, don't get me wrong, but he didn't score as much, and he did most of his work rebounding and with assists. Tony Parker, on the other hand, he had a good series scoring. He averaged 18 points a game, but in the long run, he had a couple of games where he scored a lot, and then the rest of the series didn't score quite as much. I know Kawhi Leonard started slow, but the fact is that even though he wasn't scoring as much in the first two games, he was still playing some good defense. But the next three games, when he played a little bit better, it really showed, because he was scoring more. The 29-point game he played incredible in that game, game 3. And
especially the first quarter.
Exactly. He got the Spurs off to such a big lead in both game 3 and game 4 that there was really nothing. And the funny thing is that he did offensively in game 3 and defensively in game 4. Because if you look at what the Heat did in the first two quarters of game 4, 36 points. You look at what the Spurs did in the first two quarters in game 3, 71 points. He did it scoring and he did it stopping. He played the best all-around series of anybody on the San Antonio roster.
Well, James, let's look at we did statistics for all of the games in specific, but going specifically to Kawhi's stats, I didn't realize they were this good until I took a good look at him. I mean, he only averaged, about 18 points a game, but he had a very balanced, output. He had 18 points a game, 6.5 rebounds, 2 assists, which is not too bad for a small forward. A steal and a half per game, one block a game. That's very, very well balanced. He shot 61% from the field and 58% from 3.
Yeah. He just dominated every asset, every part of the game. He dominated, whether it was trying to hold down Wade and LeBron James, whether it was trying to put the ball past the Heat defenders to get to the rim, whether it was shooting the 3. He just contributed everywhere, beyond the arc, inside, in the paint, everywhere.
I mean, the only thing that I would honestly say that Kawhi didn't do so well, I mean, he had a decent free throw percentage. 78% isn't bad. You could say that he could have taken care of the ball a little bit better. I mean, he had 10 assists, only 9 turnovers. That's a little bad, but he's not really a point guard, so I can't be too strict there. If he was a shooting guard or a small forward, I'd be a little bit more critical, but Kawhi had a really balanced output. Now, originally, I'm not going to lie to you, James, when I originally thought of who was going to win the MVP, I actually honestly thought it was going to be Tim Duncan.
He was a strong candidate.
Well, the thing is Tim Duncan had a really strong... Tim Duncan was consistent in all 5 games. You know what I'm saying? That's why I was thinking Tim Duncan was going to win the award, because Kawhi had 2... I mean, I can't say Kawhi's games were bad, because on the defensive side he was great. But, Kawhi didn't really do much offensively, and you know how offense is overrated in basketball. So,
as it is in any sport.
Right. I mean, in any sport, if you think about it, offense is always overrated. So, I thought that Kawhi was going to win, but Kawhi was such an offensive impact in the final 3 games, and his stats show it. I mean, would you disagree?
No, what? 29 points in 1 game.
I mean, when we talked off the air a few weeks ago, you truly convinced me into believing that Kawhi honestly was the finals MVP. He was that extra guy that the Spurs needed. Because, I mean, if you really think about it, what is really an MVP? The most valuable player, right? It doesn't necessarily always mean the best players. I mean, who was the most valuable player for the Spurs? And when you look at it in Game 3, when Kawhi went off for 29 points, which for him is big. I mean, LeBron's averaged 29 points throughout the series. If I'm not too far from being off. I think LeBron averaged close to 29 for the series, but
Yeah, I think that's about right.
that's not a big deal for LeBron to score 29. As a matter of fact, people would say, shouldn't LeBron do more? But for a guy like Kawhi, it kind of gives him more confidence because he's a younger guy, and his confidence has definitely gone up from this. I mean, and let's talk a little bit about Kawhi last year. Remember, Kawhi and Ginobili were, responsible for missing 2 key free throws that I'll admit as a Heat fan helped us win, because if you guys made those free throws, we would have lost. In 2013, and Kawhi was the last guy to miss that free throw, and I think it kind of haunted him, and I think he really prepared for this moment. Especially when Popovich told him, because James, I'm not sure if you were aware of the press game. Are you aware of what Popovich said about him?
No.
Well, basically, he was telling Kawhi, don't worry about Timmy, don't worry about Tony, don't worry about Manu Ginobili. You're the man, and you play your game. I need you to be aggressive. And Kawhi played aggressive, and you saw how much of an impact the Spurs benefited from having an aggressive Kawhi Leonard.
Versus passive as it was in the first 2 games.
Well, Kawhi is kind of a passive player in general. I mean, I don't watch as many Spurs games as you. Would you say he's a passive player?
No, I just think he was passive in the first 2 games, and until Pop and I think the other players, kind of gave him a little bit of confidence, and then I think that's when he started to go on his tear.
Well, now that we've both agreed that, Kawhi should have been the Finals MVP, let's talk a little bit about Kawhi's future before we move on to the next segment. How do you think this Finals MVP sets a platform for Kawhi's future
He looked like a guy when he got the trophy for the Bill Russell Award, and he also when he got the Finals trophy, he didn't look like a guy who was satisfied. He looked like a guy that wants to win numerous titles. By that, I would have to say that the future is bright for him, and I think he will win a couple more titles with the Spurs, because the way that they build their roster, and also with the way that he played, and he's taking cues from some of the best players in the league, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. The future for him is really, really bright. It is.
So are you saying Kawhi can be an all-star? And a perennial all-star, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer one day?
Hall of Famer, again, we throw the term Hall of Famer around a little bit loosely, but he's got a potential for it, but I do see him as an all-star, yes.
Do you honestly think, as a Spurs fan, let's not think about it from an analytical basketball perspective, strictly as a Spurs fan, do you see him as the next franchise piece after Tim Duncan and Ginobili and Parker retire?
I do, because they'll see that he's young, he's got all the skills, and they'll try to build around him.
Now let's talk a little bit about his growth, James. I mean, I'm sure you know this. When Kawhi originally came to the Spurs, I think it was 2010, or was it 2011?
I think it was 2011.
Yeah, it was 2011. What did you see? What have you noticed in the growth of Kawhi? What has he gotten better at from your observations of him over the years? What can you say you've seen change in him? Whether it be his personality, his game, anything.
Overall, I just have to say the fact that he's progressively gotten better at just about everything. He's gotten better at shooting. He's gotten better at, because you look at his field goal percentage is improved over the course of his career. His three-point percentage has gotten better. His points per game has increased a lot more. And if you just look at it, it's just a natural progression of a guy figuring everything out and becoming a better player. So I don't think it's just one thing in particular.
And he's not a finished product.
Oh, no way. He's got plenty of room left for improvement.
What would you say, from a basketball perspective now, Kawhi needs to work on the most as you analyze his game? What's his biggest weakness?
I'd say if he's got any weakness, maybe that's real tough if I had to pick one thing. I mean, obviously, he had a great series and he's a great player, but I still think he's got room for improvement everywhere. But I would still have to say he could probably do more in terms of scoring. because again, he had a three really good games in the finals, but if you look at his career regular season points per game, it's 10.9. I would have to say that definitely could use, he definitely should be scoring a lot more, but at the same time, he wasn't played as much as he was in the playoffs.
Well, you also got to factor in that the Spurs system is organized in a way that Kawhi would never really have to score more than 20 a game anyways, which is great. My only question to close out this Kawhi session is this, James. I'm just a little concerned. Kawhi Leonard is always known as this really, really quiet guy, right? And I think he's playing in the perfect system for his personality because, the Spurs gets almost no media attention. I'm sure you have to dig to find all your information now about the Spurs. And my concern is this: if Kawhi becomes this all-star, or, the franchise, and he's getting all these new sneaker deals, do you think that will negatively affect San Antonio in a way where Kawhi starts thinking, I should get paid more money? Because, the Spurs were saying that they were thinking of, giving him more money after, being a finals MVP and all. How that can take away from, that whole team atmosphere, especially if Greg Popovich retires within the next few years, because Kawhi is going to be playing in an era without Popovich. He's still too young to play his whole career with Pop.
I would have to say that maybe after Pop leaves, we don't know. But you have to realize that with the system that Pop has in place for the next few years, he's obviously going to get a deal. He's going to get an extension. He's going to get paid. But the thing is that how many people have actually acted out under Greg Popovich his whole career, his coaching as the Spurs? Not very many. And the thing is that the only guy that I can think of in recent memory that had any kind of issues was DeJuan Blair, and he was shipped off for a reason. Kawhi Leonard, on the other hand,
he's quiet.
He's quiet. He's quiet. Get it?
Yeah, he's quiet.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
But I'm saying in an era without Popovich, because Popovich is going to retire before Kawhi retires. That's what I was.
I would have to say in an era without Popovich, he might. But we'll have to see how that goes. Maybe the fact that he gets these moral guidelines from Pop now might help him when the new coach gets there to say, hey, this is, how we do things, this is how we feel more comfortable. Won't necessarily be a thing where he tries to pop up and looks at this opportunity to talk crap. Maybe they looked at this as an opportunity to really show how far he's come.
Well, let's just close this out by saying this. Gut feeling, Kawhi keeps his composure or he loses his composure over time?
Keeps his composure. Kid's real calm. Looked like he was real steady, and he's had really promising progression over the course of his career thus far.
Well, from what I've learned about Kawhi, he doesn't really seem to be a problem kid. I think even if Popovich leaves within the next few years, I think Kawhi is definitely a franchise piece, and I think that he's not going to let it get to his head. I mean, because we all know that when certain players take too much money, it just disrupts the whole team concept, and it would destroy the whole San Antonio atmosphere.
Another thing real quick I want to point out is that, let's not forget, Kawhi was not originally drafted by the Spurs. He was drafted by the Pacers, and the Spurs knew how good of a player he was, and they traded Lorbeck, they traded Burtons, and George Hill to get Kawhi Leonard. So I don't think that Greg Popovich would have taken that chance with just about everybody. I think he saw something in this kid.
Well, the jury's out on Kawhi. He has a lot of time to prove himself, and James and I both honestly agree that despite him not being the most offensive player in the first two games, he really deserved the Finals MVP because when he played his A game, he really was an impact player for the Spurs. So, guys, that has been our fourth segment. We are now moving on to the final two segments of our Miami Heat San Antonio Spurs recap.
Stay tuned, everybody.
Yes, so please catch our next video, and please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys.